Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have the Fit for Reading book tag. I was tagged by Steve Donahue and the original tag was created by Sarah M.G. Reeds. It seems somewhat strange to be tagged in a reading tag that surrounds fitness and exercise, considering the only exercise I ever get up to is just walks through the local forest, and I haven't done that in a long time. Or walks through the countryside, down the canal, that sort of thing. Anyway, each of these prompts deals with a different sort of fitness or activity, and I'm supposed to find a book related to them. Yes, I'm wearing the hat today because I couldn't be bothered washing my hair for this video. First, we have Zumba. Name a twisty and turny book that was super fun to read. Traitor's Blade by Sebastian Daycastel. Actually, any one of the Greatcoats books, because Sebastien Daycastel writes these as though they are some very fast-paced television adventure fantasy story. In this first book, the Greatcoats have been charged with murdering someone they didn't murder, and they're on the run. There's something of a royal conspiracy in this book, and it runs throughout the entire series before ultimately culminating in the final book. There are twists, there are turns, there are villains aplenty, and it's quite thrilling actually. I should say, the only thing I ever knew about Zumba is that when I used to work in Congleton, we had a Zumba class that would come and use our meeting room every week, run by the charity for the over 50s. And there was one woman who was that determined to lose weight that she'd actually pay and do the entire 2-hour thing. There was supposed to be 2 separate classes. She'd stay, she'd do both classes. She'd go in looking a bit like a pickled onion, and she'd come out looking like a pickled beetroot. 2. Crossfit. What is the most intense book you've read? Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. This book is dark, grim, and grotesque. Incredibly bleak. There are very few moments of light in this story, and if there is a moment of light in here, then you can be sure that catastrophe awaits. There are trigger warnings for almost every single possible trigger in the world in here. I've kept it because I think I need to reread it. It's a contentious book for me. 3. Burpees suck. Name a book you hated. I have no idea what a burpee is, but basically the book that I hate is Paulina and Fran by Rachel B. Glaser. I have deleted my review of that book because I think that it was a bit too harsh, but know that I despise that book with every fibre of my being. I think that there is not a single redeeming quality about that book. Intramural Sports. What book were you assigned to read for school, but you ended up liking it so much you couldn't wait to read it at night? The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. I can recall this being the set text for my group reading in Year 6. Now, when I was at school, Year 6 was the first year that they'd actually moved the Year 5 students into our classes as well, you know, trying to save money. I was put in this mixed group that was with Year 5s, and nobody actually understood my reading ability, which really frustrated me. I found it most irksome. But we got this book assigned to us by the teacher to read in our group, and I knew that my grandparents had a copy. So I went and I got this. Now this is entirely messed up and battered with stains all over it and a ripped cover. My knowledge of Sherlock Holmes at the time was the TV show Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd Century, an animated one where after the Reichenbach Falls, hundreds of years later, they find Sherlock Holmes, they bring him back. Dr. Watson is an android, and yeah, it just goes from there. So I was thrilled when I got the opportunity to read this, and I refused to read the copies they handed out at school. In fact, the reason I'm sniffing so much and my allergies are so bad is because this book is incredibly dusty, and I've just taken it out of a drawer after it being there for probably 5 years, if not longer. This was the book that I had at home, so I took this to school with me. I read it at school rather than read the assigned copy that we all had, and I would also read it at home so I could get ahead of everybody else, because that's the type of student that I was. You can guarantee if there was a set text at school, including into high school, and you had to read it outside of the class, then I would always read ahead of everyone else. I'm going to put this book down for a second just to tell you another story. I nearly mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird here, but To Kill a Mockingbird is now a book that I don't think I could ever reread, because before I went into year 11, so this is my GCSE year, we got told we would be reading To Kill a Mockingbird the following year. So I purchased it in the summer, and I read it in the summer. Then we were supposed to start in the September, that's what we'd been told by the teacher, only we didn't. And she said we'd have to read it over the October half term. I thought, well, I've read it once already, I can do this again. So I read it again. Then we finally started reading it in class. And I can remember being sat there once, and the teacher saying, well, we're going to be reading from this point. I was like, because she was certain nobody else in the class would have read it, so she wanted us to read it all together. Great. So I actually said, I've already read this. Can I read from the point I'm at? She said, no, you'll have to. I was like, fine. But one of the things that I found most irksome was the children in the class who would read incredibly slowly, who hated reading with a passion. And I could read faster than them. So they would be reading, but I would have read ahead, not listening to them. And there was one time I was called upon to read, and I had no idea where she was, because I hadn't been listening to the class for about 20 minutes. Had gone as far ahead as I could possibly go. And yeah, you ever get in trouble for reading too much? Then we have Running, Jogging. Name a book that follows all the standard tropes, but you still enjoyed it. Now here, Steve was incredibly kind and mentioned my books. And if you would like to purchase a copy of An Heir to Murder, then please, I'll leave a link to my website in the description. Please go there, order the books, because I released that this year and haven't been able to do any events because of the current climate and everything going on. And Steve says that the book is formulaic, and yes, I wrote that to be formulaic, and no, I was not offended by what Steve said, because anyone who's read my book, no matter what their opinion is, I am grateful for that. And also, he was incredibly kind, and we could all use a bit of kindness, can't we? Anyway, the book that I've chosen for this is The Miseducation of Evie Epworth by Matson Taylor. I read this a few months ago, twice, because I find this book hilarious. This is a book that celebrates Yorkshire and uses voices that we all know from northern comedies. It has plot lines that we all recognise from classic stories. There is nothing new in here, but Matson Taylor has such a strong comedic voice that it didn't matter. The writer makes you feel so much for the characters that you don't care that I didn't care that the story was one I'd seen before. And I think that that's the way I think that that's one of the good things, like, that everyone says when you're talking about writing. If you're writing a story that has been read before, don't worry about it, because you're going to be writing it in your own unique way. And that's something that Matson Taylor does here to great effect. This is a book that I look forward to recommending to everybody, and I really look forward to the sequels that are forthcoming, and I feel like they're just going to be brilliant. Jazzercise, a book you enjoy that is outdated or published long ago. Lonesome by Larry McMurtry. I read this in 2017 over 1 month, and it fast became one of my favourite books. It is a nostalgic read for me because I remember watching the TV series as a family when I was younger, and I'd always looked forward to reading the book. There are themes and ideas in here, I'd say, and some of the treatment of certain characters in here is a bit out of date, but at the same time, it seems fitting for the era in which Larry McMurtry is writing. I think there are some beautiful pieces of prose in here, and some parts that just capture the essence of humanity. And there is still a scene that I think about where one of the protagonists is just looking out over a desert, imagining the fact that he's actually just walking over the bones of all these dead people who have gone before him. I'm aware that this is probably seen as a book of its time, though it's not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, but I am extraordinarily fond of it. And then we have Trampoline Class. What book do you absolutely love, but it's underrated? For this, I have gone with Peaches for Monsieur le Curé by Joanne Harris, and I could actually mention any book by this author, because whilst Joanne Harris is perhaps my favourite author, I don't think a lot of people hold her to the same esteem that I do. I am holding up this book, which is the third in the Chocolat series, because I think that it blends the themes from the first two books incredibly well in this original setting from that first book. One of the things Joanne Harris always does is she takes a current theme and runs with it, yet it never seems to overshadow the story that she's telling. The Vianne Rocher books always deal with this sense of otherness and the way that we treat certain communities. I really like this one. In this one, Vianne Roche is being called back to Lansquenet by her enemy from the first book, who is worried about the state of the town. She goes back to see how things have changed, but it also deals with how she is coping as a mother. I am always thrilled by the way in which Joanne Harris writes because it is evocative. She does things with grammar. There's a sense of magic that runs throughout the prose, and I just adore it. And then we have 8, which is asking me who I tag. So I'm going to tag Emily on Noval Novels, who's trying to get me back and keeps tagging me and stuff. Sophie of Redhead Reading, Reader Book Gem, and Emma Rosen Books. I usually do 5, but I couldn't think of a 5th who hadn't already been tagged. So if you want to be the 5th, maybe you, Mary-Anne Moronsky. Either way, that was the Fit for Reading tag, and as we all know, I am not fit for reading at all. You know, if this was a sprint, then I'm coming in dead last. Can I just hand out the water? I hope that you got something out of this video besides sheer boredom. And until next time, that is all.